Weapons doesn't confuse the audience by accident. It presents a mystery that feels solvable, fragments the timeline, and then forces the viewer to wait longer than is comfortable for understanding to arrive. And even when answers finally come, they don't bring relief. That prolonged waiting, not just the violence or the witchcraft, is where the movie's horror actually lives. When the children disappear in Weapons, the movie is very careful about how it presents the event. 17 third graders leave their homes at exactly the same time in the middle of the night. There's no sign of violence, no forced entry, no chaos. The framing matters because this doesn't feel like an unknowable horror. It feels like a mystery that hasn't been solved yet. Police get involved, parents are questioned, the town starts searching for patterns, and the audience is pulled into that same mindset almost immediately. This is the first psychological move the film makes on the viewer. It trains you to believe that understanding is inevitable. The disappearance isn't staged as supernatural terror right away. It's staged as something that should eventually make sense, once the timeline lines up, once the missing information is filled in, and that expectation is crucial, because once the movie convinces you that answers are coming, it can begin delaying them. The horror doesn't start with fear, it starts with anticipation. Once Weapons convinces you that the disappearance should eventually make sense, it starts controlling when you're allowed to understand it. The story doesn't move forward in a straight line. It jumps between different moments in time and different perspectives, often showing emotional reactions before causes. As a viewer, you're constantly catching up. You see fear before context. You see consequences before explanations. You're given pieces of information without being told where they belong yet. Psychologically, this keeps your brain in a state of suspended problem solving. Okay, when does this happen? Does this come before or after the disappearance? Is this connected to what we saw earlier? The film never lets those questions settle. Just as a scene feels like it might clarify something, the story shifts again to another character, another moment, another fragment. And because the movie already trained you to believe the mystery is solvable, every jump feels like a delay, not a detour. The audience isn't confused, they're held. Understanding feels just close enough to feel imminent and never close enough to arrive. Eventually, Weapons does begin to explain what happened, but the timing of that explanation is the point. By the time the film reveals Gladys's role, the witchcraft, the basement, the spell that led the children out of their homes, the audience has already spent most of the movie waiting. We've already lived with the uncertainty. We've already watched the damage unfold without context. Psychologically, explanation doesn't reset fear once the waiting has gone on long enough. It doesn't feel like relief. It feels like confirmation. The information arrives fragmented and retrospective, after the audience has already filled the silence with imagined possibilities. Instead of thinking, now I understand, the viewer thinks, so that's what I was sitting with this whole time. The answers don't undo the waiting, they reframe it. And that's where anticipation turns into something heavier, not shock, but dread. By the time the film explains Alex's role, the tone is very deliberate. Alex is a child acting under coercion. His aunt, Gladys, uses witchcraft to incapacitate his parents and forces him to help her. The film doesn't present this as a twist meant to redirect blame. It presents it as context, and context doesn't make the experience feel better. When Gladys is gone, Alex is placed with another aunt, someone presented as kinder, safer, removed from what happened. On the surface, this feels like relief. Not because everything is explained, but because Alex finally seems protected. And that's where the unease settles in. Weapons has spent the entire film showing how easily safety can be undone, how harm can hide inside ordinary relationships, and how long it can take before anyone understands what's really happening. So even in this moment of care, the audience is left hoping rather than resting, hoping that this time it holds, hoping that nothing else is waiting in the dark. The movie doesn't turn that hope into fear, it leaves it exposed. By the end of Weapons, the audience understands what happened. The mystery has been explained. The spell is broken. The children return, and yet the fear doesn't collapse. That's because the movie was never just making you wait for information. It was making you wait for permission to feel safe again. Understanding arrives late. Care arrives without certainty. Safety is offered without guarantees. So instead of releasing tension, the film teaches the audience something more unsettling. Waiting doesn't always end when answers arrive. Sometimes it just changes what you're waiting for. You stop waiting to understand what happened and start waiting to see whether things will hold, whether the harm is really over, whether the care will last, whether safety can be trusted again. That prolonged waiting is where Weapons does its deepest damage, not by shocking the audience, but by leaving them suspended. Weapons doesn't end with a scream or a final twist. It ends by asking the audience to hope, without giving them certainty. And that's why the movie stays with you. Because fear usually gives way to relief. Understanding usually closes the loop. But Weapons refuses that comfort. It shows how long the mind can be kept waiting, and how deeply that waiting can burrow once fear has nowhere left to go. The story ends. The waiting doesn't.